G'day, ladies and gentlemen, the Buttsmarn here, and now for something completely different. I am absolutely fascinated by history, like a lot of people, I think, and I decided what would be absolutely fantastic is if I found out a little bit more about where I came from, the history of my family, and the families that were apart that then came together to create beautiful old me. And you know what I thought? Once I had my son Atticus, I thought it would be fantastic for him when he's a little bit older to look at an actual family tree, a well-researched, thoroughly researched family tree and go, hey, that's where I come from. These are the people that had to get together, that had to be together to create me. And every single one of those people has stories and has other lines of lineage that come off them. And it's very, very interesting. And then around about the same time, I discovered someone on TikTok that I thought was absolutely amazing. And it's this guy, Jesse Northern, an American-based genealogist who specializes in researching American descent from European ancestry. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if he could have a look at mine? Because he's gone through some big celebrities in the past and trailed them all the way back to the kings and the queens of England and all over the spot. And I thought, you know what, I'm pretty fucking important, so let's have a look at mine. We have him here to look at, for the very first time, at my family tree. Jesse, welcome to the show. Is it a show? Sure. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you very much for doing this with me. It's been a lot of fun to learn about your family and give you some of that information.
It's crazy to see how far you can really follow lineage back. I mean, obviously, we all have history and ancestors, but when you look at it and then go back through all of these people over so many generations and how many people are involved in creating, you know, take me for example, to creating me as a human being. It takes so many people and it's so much luck and it's a crazy thing to look at.
It's absolutely insane. Like I know a lot of people say like, oh, if my parents hadn't done this, then I wouldn't have been born. And it's like, yes, that's true. And if an infinite number of other people up there, all these little things didn't happen, that's also the same result, is that you wouldn't be here. And it's a lot of people also like to, they focus on their surname or just like a couple surnames that they're familiar with. But, you know, when people say like, oh, my great 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 grandfather, it's like, okay, you've got 32 great 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 grandparents. Like,
Wow.
which one are you talking about? And so it gets exponentially bigger until, family trees are almost like really family bushes, because it expands and expands and expands, and suddenly the number of ancestors you have in a given generation is more people than were alive at a certain point. It starts to close in on itself to where, we're all descended from people from 2,000 years ago, but 2,000 years ago, with how generations work, the math just doesn't add up. And so those people are our ancestors millions of times. And so it's so crazy to think that, we're able to trace back not quite that far, but still hundreds of years and discover all these different things. And, people that you've never heard of, you would have never heard of, but without them doing everything that they did, we just wouldn't be here.
Now, I'm itching to get to mine, but I wanted to know from you, has there been a moment in your career where you found a document, you found a connection with someone, and it was just like a eureka moment? I can't believe I've discovered this one person is in this person's family tree or bush.
I'm not sure if there's a single moment that stands out, but something that has been really, really rewarding is being able to link a couple clients and some friends to basically medieval Europe and the aristocracy and the monarchs of the time, because not everyone knows this, but it's relatively common to be descended from like King Edward from England. And so the concept that you're descended from that person, to me, isn't what gets me, but it's, can we figure out how? Can we prove with a paper trail from the 1300s to now that yes, your 20th great grandfather is this person? And so whenever I've been able to do that, which is a few times, I find like the link and then I'm like, oh, from here it's all really well documented and I have it in all these books. I have a whole just like thing of books over here that is just for basically that purpose of, can we link this person to essentially a world family tree where there's already so much work being done just because of how notable those people are. And it's really, really amazing to get to put someone that I'm working with into this tree. And I'm like, and now you have an infinite amount of connections to make and learn about that you wouldn't have known otherwise. So,
Well, mate, it is very fascinating, and that's why I sort of reached out to you, because I've had people in my family do this research before, but it only ever goes back one generation, two, maybe three generations. Like, it's never quite that thorough. And then I saw your work on TikTok and Instagram, and I urge people to go and check that out. We'll put your links down below, but it is very, very interesting to see how people are connected to historical people or famous people throughout history, and it's just marvelous to have that connection with history, because we look back at 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago, and it doesn't really make sense. It's hard to comprehend how long that time is, but then when you look at the generations, it really puts it into perspective. But you're going to share your screen. Let's have a look at mine, if we could, please.
yes, of course. Okay. Okay. And so this, I'm looking forward to you getting the physical chart
Yeah.
because the screen does not do it justice because we can't really see much, and then we have to zoom in, and then we're not seeing the full thing. But anyways, yeah, this you gave me a fair bit of stuff to start with, more than some people. Some people are like, I kind of know my grandparents' names, and that's like it. So
Yeah.
it was nice that you gave me a little bit more to work with. But one of my favorite things to discover are photographs that other people have posted online of these people. Like, I know early on I sent you the picture of this Jesse right here, and that is so fascinating to me. It's like, because already this person is your great great grandmother, and you have probably, I don't know, 80 people who are descended from her that are also related to you,
Yeah.
but you don't know most of them. And so someone had a picture and was like, I'm going to put this on the internet and I will find it.
I showed that photo to my grandmother on my father's side,
Oh,
so it's her grandmother, and
yeah.
she was amazed. She could not believe it. She was just so happy to see that. So,
Oh, I'm so glad.
she never really knew her that well. My grandmother Patricia, she was brought up by nuns after her father returned from war, and in a celebration was hit by a truck back in Australia and died after returning from the Second World War. So her connection to her family was. It was hard to sort of keep that, and so it's so amazing to find these photos, and yeah, it was beautiful for her. She really, really loved that, and so did
Oh,
my dad as well. He was very taken back by that.
good. I'm very very glad to hear that. And yeah, I just so the we have the chart, and then these charts I'm doing when I make them, they're all in the style of Useful Charts, which is a company started by Matt Baker, who I also work directly with. And I just think that the style that he created is so visually pleasing and easy to understand.
For sure.
And so I've just done this, made hundreds of these, and so I intend to keep doing it. But so I also have some documents and just a few things up here that I wanted to show because I thought they were pretty cool. Um, so this is actually a record for World War One service. This is not your great great grandfather, but this is his son. So this is Gordon Butterfield's brother, but it does list next of kin father as also Charles William Butterfield, and that is your great great grandfather, and it has like where he was living at the time. And
Oh,
I
wow.
looked this up, and I don't think I think it's just like some business building at this point, but yeah, it is really fun seeing addresses, and especially if
Mm.
the homes are still there, you can see like, wow, they lived right there. Like I'm seeing where they would have stood. Um, but yeah, there's a few different ones of these, but we don't got forever. So, but I could go on for hours about about this. So, and then here, it's a little hard to read, but essentially what this is a manifest for the ship that Robert Butterfield came to Australia on from England. So Robert Butterfield was your ancestor who came to Australia, and he was born. Oh boy, I don't know if I remember right off the top of my head, but we'll come back around. But so he was born in the 1830s, and then in 1858 is when he came to Australia. Um,
There are quite a
so
lot of information and pieces of or documents and that type of stuff when it comes to people coming out to Australia, which is always fascinating to see, to have that person's name and that decision that they've made to directly affect your life. And I've seen similar things to this piece here. I don't know if I've seen this one before, but even little things like you see the name of the ship, the Northern Light. It's just madness to think that these people jumped on a ship, and I'm not sure how long a journey would have been in the 1850s. I imagine it would be a month, two. I have no idea.
yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely familiar
I'm,
with how long it would take
I might
either,
just
but
Google that as we talk, because that's crazy.
yeah, no, it would be quite a journey, and because it would be quite a journey, like the odds that you ever go back
Mm.
are so slim. Like you are, and I know, like for this Robert Butterfield, he did not. His father, his mother, they did not. They died in England, so he probably never saw them again. When after he was like 22, he left, and that was it to start his new life in a new place.
So we've got, this is just the first thing that comes up, between 70 to 110 days, which is
Wow.
crazy
Yeah.
because I know flying from Sydney to Heathrow in London, like that's like a 24-hour flight, 22-hour flight with a stopover, maybe 24, 25. But it's long then. But to consider that it's 70 times longer, if not more,
Yeah,
it's horrifying.
it is. And so many people just risked it all to do it.
And even like convicts and people who were taken from England, a lot who were, and this is how the old story goes, and in the 1700s, people were taken from England if they stole a loaf of bread because they were starving, and they were sent out to the penal colonies in Australia, and like they were basically slaves, really. They were just
Yeah.
taken and thrown into this world, and once they've finished their sentence, if they survived, they just had a new life in a developing country. And crazy to think. I mean, I always think about times back then, like how horrifying it would be in comparison to now. The number one thing that comes to mind, like, I mean, there's 1,000 things you can think about: sanitation, you can think about food. But I know when I go camping, which is very rare because I hate it, but my skin is so dry. Imagine how dry your skin would be. It would just be awful.
Yeah, I can't imagine what all of these people endured, but again, going back, that's why we're all here, because all these different people, and pretty much I would say a large number of your ancestors, all it was like sometime in the early mid 1800s, they came from England and Ireland and Scotland mostly
Mm.
to Australia, and they all had to do it for so much to happen. So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
crazy to look back on.
absolutely. So let's see what else. What else do I have here? Oh, so this is something I always really like. Just seeing like the physical book that like marriage records and birth records and death records are kept. And so this is actually just a picture that someone has uploaded to ancestry.com. But luckily it has the little logo in the bottom. So I know it's from the Essex archives. And right here we can see marriage and then Abraham Butterfield and Elizabeth Page.
Wow.
And yeah, and it's, that's basically just like, okay, it's good proof that they got married, but I've gone through books like this flipping through the pages, and it's hard to not think about like how much time I spent looking at your family tree, and just this one little entry is relevant to me, but there's hundreds and thousands in here of just history and stories, and I wish I could know it all. I really wish I could.
Yeah, and you consider like what would have happened if these people didn't get together or they didn't meet or if they met someone else or they didn't get married. How many lives and millions of lives that would have been affected and changed and completely different. It's that sort of butterfly effect, isn't it? It's like
Yeah.
one tiny thing changes, like a person meeting someone at a dance hall back in the 1900 or the early part of the 20th century or whatever, changes so many lives today. So it's just, I love that. And Abraham Butterfield, isn't that a powerful name? My God.
It is. It really is. I like it a lot. So, yeah. Okay.
Ooh.
Yeah. So here's a photo, and these heads are on the tree here.
Yes.
But and so these are Coopers, and so they're a Cooper married a Butterfield, and so this is basically the Coopers family, because everything gets crazy. You're
Yeah.
following a surname, but every single woman marrying into that family has a whole explosion branch to go into on its own. So I'm not entirely sure of everyone's name, but I love old portraits like this. I
Yeah.
love that whoever got the family together to capture this moment in time, especially when these two, who I think are your great, 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 great grandparents, when they were probably in their 70s, late 60s, early 70s. Yeah, it's just marvelous to look at. And
No, it
let's see.
certainly is. I love that type of stuff. And this is a great thing about Ancestry and websites like it. Like you actually have access to this. I know when you show older people, like their minds are blown by the. I know when I talk to my grandma now, like or even my pop, he has a question or there's an issue or whatever we're trying to fix, and I say, "Oh, I'll just Google it." Like he laughs at me. He laughs, like he goes, oh. Like, mate, that's just how it is, bros. Like, that's just how it is now. That's what people do, all right? Just calm down. It'll be fine. I think how they used to live was like, if they didn't know an answer and they didn't want to go down to the local library to find out, they just lived the rest of their lives never knowing that answer. And they just went on, they just moved on with it.
Yeah, it's true. And yeah, one of my favorite instances of being able to find a photo that was exciting for someone was a roommate that I had in college. Her grandmother uh, was raised not by her parents, and I don't think she had seen her parents since she was maybe 7 or 8 years old. And one of the first things I found when I was just looking at that family tree was a picture of her with like a bunch of family members and her parents. And sent that to her, and her grandma was like,
Wow.
I didn't even know a photo of me with my parents existed.
That's great.
And it is just, it is unbelievably rewarding.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's a gift. That's what it is. You're giving someone a gift of knowledge, and it's hard to put a price on something like that. Like, what is that worth to a person? So it's very it must be a rewarding job that you do, even though it must be difficult to go through all these documents, but to give someone something and give them an answer or give them an idea or something to follow on. I think it's a real beautiful part of your industry, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot of days it is really, really hard or even just boring because you literally are just looking at black handwritten text on white for a long time, but the end result is so worth it. And so the next thing I have is an earlier photo of these two here. So
Wow.
these are the same two, the old folks from the last photo, and this was
They're very creepy.
probably
They're very creepy. I'll say that. Like they're family, so
yeah.
I can say it. But very creepy, old George and Carolyn. My God.
No,
Frederick, sorry.
absolutely. And that's the thing, is because these two were born in the 1830s, and so judging by the outfits and the facial expressions and how old they look, this was probably taken sometime in the 1870s, I would say. And that crosses over with another interest and passion of mine, which is basically the beginning of film and photo. And I think that whole history is incredibly fascinating too. And so I know that when they were posing for what is probably either a daguerreotype or a tintype photo, exposure could take a really long time. And so they're like, okay, well, sit here for anywhere from 2 to 8 minutes, and it has to, expose and wet whatever is the photo is going to be on. And so yeah, getting to look at these faces, and I always think like, what is going through their heads in this moment? Like,
Yeah.
do they think it's cool that this is happening? Do they probably can't even fathom that 150 years from this moment, someone's going to be looking at it and talking about them still. Like, there's no way they were thinking that.
No, they were probably terrified. They were probably like, okay, what does this do to me? This is the whole taking of the soul and all that. Yeah, scary stuff for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I love that sort of crossover with those two interests of mine. Okay, let's see. I don't remember what's next. Oh, okay. So let's see. Boofler. I'm probably saying that wrong. Let's see. See, I go through so many names and so many dates, and I have a lot of them up here, but there's not. I can't remember it all.
Hmm.
So, but I see that the Booflers were married into the Morton family, your grandmother's family. So it seems here we have John and Robert. And apparently there was a kerosene explosion in 1867 at Robert's house.
Wow.
And yeah, his wife was alone there, and as was their custom, was sleeping with a kerosene lamp burning.
Okay.
Very, very safe.
Yes.
And yeah, basically it's just like some article from some sort of magazine or newspaper basically saying, hey, the flame came in contact with the oil, it like blew up, and luckily people were able to save the house, and then the loss sustained may be estimated from 20 to 30 pounds, which was probably quite a lot
Quite a lot, yeah.
back then. But it is funny looking at that now. It's like, that's just like lunch.
Yeah, it is. Yes, absolutely. That
But
is.
back then it was like, oh, your house was partially destroyed.
Isn't that crazy? To have, and that's the other thing. You have these incidences that happen, and they're recorded on newspaper, and they're digitalized, and there you have that. Yeah, I haven't really thought about how the branches of this family tree go off, because there are so many different people you never think of because they don't have the same last name as you. You don't consider them family, but they are.
Yeah, yeah. You just, I like before I knew any of my ancestry, I knew like my last name, my mom's name, I knew, and all my grandparents and their maiden names. And maybe I knew one other one. So I had basically 5 names that I knew, and those were the ones I was interested in. And it wasn't until researching it myself that I was like, hold on, I can just go in this whole other direction for this woman whose last name I've never heard before.
Yeah, that is
But
crazy.
they're just as much family as the others.
It's madness, and I thank you for taking your time to go through it. I know you got things to do, so let's keep moving forward. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. All my friends and family and my wife, they've heard this a million times, but it's fun to talk about.
For sure. Well, it's a massive interest of yours, obviously.
Yeah.
So where are we? The Bridge Hotel. Oh, so he owned a pub. Very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this is apparently a different fire.
Oh God.
Because this one is one of the servants going to bed accidentally set her curtains on fire. So I don't know how common all the fires were. I assume we're hearing about it more because the Boofler family did have like a hotel, and they were sort of proprietors of that kind of thing. But yeah, I couldn't find any other articles about it, just the fire ones. So I'm not sure.
So it's funny. This happened at the Bridge Hotel in Condobolin, which I'm not sure if it still exists. I'm sure it may very well. But that is Condobolin was where my grandmother was born, and she was born in the 40s, 1939, something like that.
Okay.
So this family that was married into her side, they were in that area for a long period of time.
Yeah. So if she was born then, yeah, I mean, we're talking like 3 to 4 to 5 generations back. They were there.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. What do we have here? Okay. So Thomas Fitzpatrick. Here he is. Cool. So this is your grandmother's great grandfather, Thomas Fitzpatrick. So it's a little bit hard to read, but essentially he was riding into town on a horse, presumably, and some neighbor or someone he knew just like saw him riding. And when the neighbor was headed that direction later on, found him basically just like on the ground, like face down, like there was blood, there was no like horse or anything. And so, presumably he fell off and died.
Shit.
Yeah. And I know it's never the most pleasant thing to read, but it is always interesting when there's these, it's always interesting when family dies of not natural causes.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
and I can send this to you afterwards, but it's basically in this witness's words of like, oh, I didn't see this and I saw this and I lifted up his face and there was blood there, and it's so fascinating to hear it through the words of a man in 1882. So because it's not written, he's just recounting his experience, and whoever was taking it down just threw it into this little article here. So, okay. So that was a lot of sort of there's variations of that stuff for a lot of these family members. And, we could be here for days and not get through them all. But there was one thing I wanted to talk to you about on your mom's side that I spent a lot of time looking into, and ultimately nothing really came of it. But because of what it was, I felt I had to take some time to go through.
Sure.
So, basically, and then what I always tell people when they look at my charts is like, okay, if you get lost, just like go back to a name and just follow the lines. So starting here from your mom, we're going to go up here, and then we're going to go to Anne Hartley up here. And Anne Hartley was the grandchild of Mary Brown, and then Mary Brown's grandfather was Alexander Brown. And he was born in 1665, died in 1734, Scotland. And I was like, great, cool. And when I was looking him up, so Ancestry.com is what I do. I always start at Ancestry.com. They have a great system. I'm really used to it. They have a lot of records. And then I basically expand as I need to other databases and, try to find books if I can. But a thing about Ancestry is they will basically tell you, oh, this person has already put the parents of person A into their tree. And so a lot of the times it's convenient to look at that, and all you have to do is basically cross-reference and say, okay, can I find records that show that this is true? And there were parents listed for Alexander Brown. And so I was like, okay, great, let me look into this. And I couldn't find any actual document that said that this John and this Agnes were the parents of Alexander. And so ultimately I didn't put it in the tree because I didn't find proof that was sufficient. There were a lot of different people saying it though. And the reason I think that is because if this Agnes was the mother of Alexander Brown and this Eliezer was the father of Agnes, going onto this wikitree.com, if you follow Eliezer's ancestry a few generations, you get to Mary Stuart. And Mary Stuart was the daughter of King James II of Scotland. And so what a lot of people love to do is they're like, you know what? This person existed here. It's feasible that they could have been the child of this person. And then this gets me that really fun ancestry that I'm
Yeah.
looking for. And they're like, sure, why not? There's
Done.
nothing to disprove it, there's nothing to prove it. And so because I saw this, I was like, I have to see if this is true. And it is still possible that it is, but I could not find any proof that would be like, yes, we can link these two people together. And so I didn't include it in the tree, but I spent a lot of time because, again, that's the thing, that it's so satisfying to be able to make that connection.
Wow.
But if I had, then your tree would have been like twice as tall.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Because
that
then
does that then connect to a whole line of nobility then?
yeah, I mean, I actually, right above me, I can look at a chart that has Scotland on it. And if this connection was true and it was documented, then I mean James II goes to King James I, and then Robert III, Robert II, who is the grandchild of Robert the Bruce, and then it can go up, and then it goes into the old Anglo-Saxon England where you're descended from Alfred the Great,
Huh.
and it just explodes if you can make those connections. And so I always think that people do that because maybe they don't know any better and they're just like, oh, someone else did it. But it's a desirable thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And
for
if
sure.
you can't, you know, if you just need a little thing to make it work, a lot of people will do that. And I fell into that trap a lot when I was first sort of discovering it. I was like, oh, look at this connection. And then months later, I'll discover that wasn't true. Like, that was not actually, there was no real proof of documents that this was how it is.
So what are
So,
we looking for here to connect those two?
so we'd be basically a thing that I would look for. And, I think I was looking up, there is a book on the Hamilton family that was on, I believe it was archive.org, and I'll have to see if I can pull it up, but um, it has basically the Hamilton family, all the descendants, and it would stop when a daughter of a Hamilton would marry into another family, and then the name would basically change. And so what I was looking for was this Eliezer Hamilton. Did he have a daughter named Agnes Hamilton? And if it was applicable, they would list the spouse of that daughter.
Hmm.
And it wouldn't go further, but that would be something that could get me to be like, okay, at least this last name makes sense, and I have more circumstantial evidence to almost prove it. But I believe when I looked up Eliezer Hamilton's descendants in the book, there was not even an Agnes Hamilton listed.
Right.
And so I'm like, so I have to think, why is that not the case? Like, is she just an outlier? And then I would look at a few of his other descendants that are listed in the book and sort of try to piece them into this tree that was here. And every time I would do that, it would just be like, it feels weird for Agnes to be here. Like, the time frame wouldn't work, or there were two children born in 1630, and I'm like, you know what? I think this is another Agnes Hamilton who may or may not be related to the family, but is not in this line.
Mm.
And so, to me, that is the easiest way to go back that far, because usually in the 1600s at the earliest, the records of that you're getting from like church records and parishes and stuff like that, that usually runs out in the 1600s at the earliest. And so unless they're already a notable family at that time, family history books are some of the best ways that you can find that, because the people that wrote those in many cases were already from 200 years ago, so they had maybe more of an inkling towards things, and they had still word of mouth. And ultimately, that may not be proof enough for some people, but for me it is, because even, you know somewhere along the line there could easily be a bastard child, and
Mm.
there's so many opportunities for it to not be true, that at a certain point you have to decide for yourself what's good enough for you. And I would always look up like authors of who wrote the books and everything. And if they seem respectable enough, then I'm going to take that as, okay, I believe this. And because usually they have a lot of sources for where they got things.
Yes.
So that's usually what I think. So unfortunately, I could not connect you to King James II. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm sure someone out there might have something. Who knows? But you never know. But well, mate, thank you very much for doing all of that. It was very, very fascinating to look at, and there's so many names on here that we can look into in the future and all that type of stuff. So thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Where can people find you?
Oh, okay. So the place where I probably do the most stuff still is my TikTok, which is Jesse7699. I don't post there all the time, but I try to as much as I can. And then my website, if you want to reach out to me, if you want to inquire about anything or get a chart like this done, is jessemsnorthern.com. And then hopefully we can post that in the description.
For sure, mate.
So those are the two places that I'm the most active and do the most things. But if you also want to find me on Instagram, that is Jesse Northern Ancestry. And yeah, those are probably the best places to find me.
Well, mate, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate that, and your work was impeccable. So thank you very much. And it's not just me, but it's my family that very much appreciate it. And for generations to come, I'm sure this chart will be passed down and have a thorough understanding of where they came from.
Good. Well, I'm very glad, and tell your family that I am happy that they are happy.
Good on you, Jesse. Thank you, mate. Thank you very much to Jesse. He's an absolute legend. Go and check him out on Instagram and TikTok. What an absolute top bloke. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for checking out the video. We'll see you next week for another one. See you later. Au revoir. Goodbye. Toodaloo. Au revoir. Bye.